All right, welcome into the Hockey Talk Show. Good to be here with you on this Wednesday night. I believe it is a Wednesday evening. We've got a full slate of items to get to on the program tonight, and we'll be getting to most of those. Phone number is live at 631-438-1768. Some audio issues last night. I hope that we've been able to overcome those for you on tonight's show. Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Hockey Talk Show. And, of course, on YouTube, Hockey Talk Show and HockeyTalkShow.com. Want to talk about expansion this evening. We got to get into expansion once again. Seattle on top of everybody's mind. Apologize, I'm having a little bit of a headphone difficulty here. All right. I don't know if that's better. Feels like it's not that better. Feels there. Hello. All right, we'll move through it quickly here. Hopefully the audio is okay. If you guys are having any issues, you let me know on the Facebook and YouTube comments. We'll take those below, of course. Thumbs up or down on the audio for the show for tonight. And I want to quickly apologize to the podcast folks that we didn't get anything over to you guys yesterday. We had some audio issues and show just was not good enough. I'm going to touch on this quickly. I think we're going to do like a quick one in and out. We were doing awesome sound wise, and now I don't know. I'm having a little bit of difficulty even getting the sound up myself. All right, let's try this again. We should be back now. Sounding okay, I believe. Again, thumbs up or down on the audio. Let me know in the comments below if that is working for you at all. Couple of quick adjustments here. It's looking better on our end. Let me know on your end if that's working for you guys. I do hope so. Hopefully we're working. Okay, number is live at 631-438-1768. And, of course, like I said, Facebook and YouTube comments. Let's get on with it. Expansion, Seattle. We talked about this yesterday, the fact that the city council over there in Seattle approved this plan for a $600 million renovation. And thank you guys for checking in. $600 million renovation on Key Arena. One thing that we didn't really get into last night on the show was the fact that this was important for everybody involved, including the city of Seattle. Not only are they going to potentially get a National Hockey League team, not only are they getting $600 million to renovate the arena with, but they're also getting Key Arena off their back. Right now, the arena is owned by the city of Seattle. So they're footing the bill for it. And that's the big issue for the city right there, because they're sitting out there shelling out for this arena that is not booking a whole slew of shows, which it could be doing. And while they're doing that, you know, they don't have any shows coming in, any money coming in, and they're, you know, paying the freight on the place, which is never good for any city. That's why governments stink at running things and private businesses are amazing at running things. They know how to do what they need to do. They know how to bring in profits. Government usually tends to not be all that great at stuff. Bureaucracy a lot of the times gets in the way. And as we can see there with the Seattle arena, you know, you're paying the freight on this thing and you're not booking a lot of shows. You don't have 41 nights in there with a hockey team. You don't have 40 some odd nights in there with a basketball team. That's going to cost you a lot. You bring those two things in, you get that nut off your back, and now all of a sudden you're moving. You're making things happen. And not only are you no longer paying the expense on an arena that's not making any money, but now you're generating tons in sales tax. So that is a good issue for the city of Seattle that we really didn't get into too much last time we spoke on yesterday's show. So thanks for catching up with us here tonight. Couple of other issues that we're going to get into with the expansion of the National Hockey League to Seattle. And then we're also going to talk about trade bait, which I'm really intrigued by. Trade bait is a huge topic of conversation. Sportsnet in Canada came up with these rankings of who is potentially out there from each franchise. So we're going to talk about that in a big way. Whatever your favorite team is, who made the list. We're going to get into that on this episode of the Hockey Talk Show. A couple of quick hits here, though. A little bit of, cleanup as we get started on the program here tonight. And I do want to talk about goaltenders very quickly. It is worthy to note he hasn't played a game since October 13th. But Mr. Marc-Andre Fleury will be back with the Vegas Golden Knights. He practiced with them today for the first time since 10/13. He had that concussion in the game against the Red Wings. He's been out ever since. We all know about the goalie carousel that was going on in Vegas. That is now starting to slow down a bit. It looks like Marc-Andre Fleury back on the ice for practice. I would say, maybe 2 weeks or so until we can see him in a game. He was not made available to the media after the practice, but Gerard Gallant said that Fleury will travel on the Golden Knights' first dad's trip, but did not say if he would play this weekend against the Nashville Predators or the Dallas Stars. Gallant said, quote, "It's good to see him out there for his sake. He's been out a long time, and getting back out there with the boys, there's nothing better than that." Fleury was 3-1-0 with a 2.48 goals against average and a 9.25 save percentage. Golden Knights are 14-8-1 in his absence, including 6 wins by Malcolm Subban and 5 by Legacy. Jonathan Marchessault chimed in saying, "The goalies have played for us and done an amazing job, but when Fleury comes back, it's going to be huge. He's the real leader on our team, and he's the guy we want to battle for." So Fleury coming back in, Roberto Luongo on his way out. Florida Panthers announcing that Roberto Luongo will miss a significant amount of time due to injury. He was injured. Let me see here. Coach Bob Boughner on Wednesday said he is going to miss several weeks with a lower body injury. He was injured in the Islander game, if I'm not mistaken, right? By the way, looking fierce as ever, that Roberto Luongo. Look at my man right there. Looking fierce as all heck. Whether that's 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or 5 weeks, we'll see how his rehab goes. Boughner said definitely out for a while, obviously lower body, and it's going to be an extended period of time. He was hurt in the Islander game when he was making a right pad save and his leg extended, hyperextended on a Ryan Pulock slap shot, 2:31 into the second period. He immediately lay down and he really needed to be helped off the ice. It was not a pretty looking injury, and it was the kind of injury that you can see that, you know, an older goaltender would get, you know, like anybody would see that injury. I mean, of course it could happen, but it seemed like such a routine play, and it felt like the way Roberto Luongo couldn't put any of the pressure back on his legs, that it just, I don't know, something about when he went down, I just saw his age. You know, just really saw his age. By the way, how could you not love those Florida Panther uniforms? Look how gorgeous those things are. And I love the setup that Roberto Luongo has of the all white. I like that a lot. I really do. I like that a lot. I think it's important for goaltenders to have white equipment. You know, they say that players should have black tape on their sticks. That, you know, black tape, you know, when the puck sits against the black tape, it kind of hides the puck a little bit. And even if it's just 1/10 or 2/10 of a second, gives the goalie a little bit of a hard time to see. Gives, you know, he doesn't see the puck coming off the black background as well as he would off a white background. You know, so they say those little tiny things give a goaltender, or a shooter, I should say, the advantage. I feel like a goalie with white equipment, that kind of helps him a little bit in a couple of different ways. One, when the shooter's looking for a spot, you know, the white against the white netting in the background, a little blurry. And two, you know, I feel like it'll be easier for him and his teammates to find the puck would the puck hit him, fall straight down, and you have to go and try and find it. You know, if you're looking against a black goalie pad or a black glove or whatever, as your teammates try and cover the puck for you or get the puck out, again, those split-second differences, you know, I feel like it's a little bit harder to find. So I like the all-white look on a goalie, and I think Roberto's got a really, really nice setup in this this look that he's got going on with the Florida Panthers. I think it's really, really nice. So there's a couple of just quick hits for you. The goaltenders, Fleury in, Roberto Luongo out. Let's talk about Seattle a little bit. We let off the show with this, and again, not only just the city council losing the mortgage, if you will, on Key Arena. A couple of other things that are interesting about the possibility of an expansion team coming into Seattle here. You know, I was doing my research today, and one thing that I noticed was around 4 years ago, there was a huge buzz about the Seattle market. If you remember, there was a lot of talk about moving the Sacramento Kings up to Seattle, and apparently the ownership group of that basketball franchise was going to pay the bill to get the arena into shape and modernize it. And the National Hockey League really kept their eye on that, and they really wanted to be a part of that. They felt like if an NBA team will come in and pay the freight on a renovation, then an NHL expansion team can slide right in, whether it's with the NBA team ownership or separate ownership altogether. They felt like they didn't have to do any of the heavy lifting, and they could just move right in there and make it happen. So ever since 2013, we've sort of heard these rumblings about Seattle. In fact, apparently there was a survey that was taken amongst the National Hockey League executives. I don't know how true this is, but it certainly does make a little bit of sense. And they were discussing where they're going to expand to. And the top 3 cities that they came up with were indeed Seattle, Vegas, and Quebec City. And they were indeed in that order. So what's interesting about this is they wind up going to Vegas first, but apparently the National Hockey League, going back 4 years, wanted to expand in this order: Seattle, Vegas, and then they wanted to go into Quebec City. So much like we talked about on the show yesterday, I said, I think it's, even though it's crazy, I think that the NHL will eventually expand into all 3 of those markets. And judging by some of the things that I found this morning, I think that is absolutely true. That eventually that's where the National Hockey League is going, to 34 franchises. And I think that is a fairly good roundabout number for them. Again, if you're watching along, you want to call into the show, the number 631-438-1768. At Hockey Talk Show on social, and of course, hockeytalkshow.com. Stop by the website and find out all the ways you can consume the show, even through podcast. Yeah, I think the return of the Quebec Nordiques, I do think Canada needs another franchise. The problem with the Canadian market right now is you have Calgary in a weird position with the arena deal, and you have Ottawa not being able to sell out playoff games. And that's a huge problem for the National Hockey League. You know, it's a big problem to get over. But I was thinking about it today, and Calgary, believe it or not, I think is an interesting problem for the National Hockey League expanding to Seattle. And I'll tell you why. I want to get into the reasons why. But I'm certainly eager to hear your thoughts on this. If you think it should be Quebec next, or you think it should be Seattle next, because it looks like this Seattle thing is gaining a lot of momentum. And what I mean by that is today is Wednesday, so tomorrow is Thursday, or today is Thursday, depending on when you're listening to this or watching this. The National Hockey League has a Board of Governors meeting coming up. And from what I understand, one of the first topics that they're going to be discussing at the Board of Governors meeting, which is where the National Hockey League does all its business, Several times a year, all the governors meet and they sit down and they discuss the game. And, you know, they'll break off into groups and they'll tackle little issues, and then they'll come back into a big major group, and then they'll talk about the bigger issues. Every team has governors that they send there. A lot of times it's the general managers. Sometimes it's the president of hockey ops. Sometimes it's the owners themselves. It all depends on the franchise, but they're all represented, all the teams, and they discuss the game and where it's going. And of course, expansion is always going to be a part of that discussion. Now, it is not on the official agenda for the National Hockey League, but from what I understand from all the buzz that's going on in the world of hockey right now and the Twitterverse, expansion is going to be a big part of this conversation. The fact that Seattle was able to pass this through the city council 7-1 so quickly and approve a $600 million arena renovation is very exciting for the National Hockey League. And the reason being, and I think the reason why Seattle was always #1 on the list, at least back in 2013, was that arena, was Key Arena. It was the fact that all they really needed was a renovation to get going. You know, arenas are everything for the National Hockey League. In fact, it might be the reason why Houston edges out Quebec City for a franchise. And I know Quebec has an arena, but Houston has an arena, an owner that's ready to go, corporate sponsors, so on and so forth. They have the full package. You know, there's already a season ticket holder base in Houston that can easily come right over and be National Hockey League fans. I mean, think about how many season ticket holders and fans the Houston Rockets have. You already have that list to market to on top of anybody else. Now, obviously, Quebec City is going to have a ton of people that are interested in hockey. I'm well aware of that. But you have ownership and you have corporate sponsorship issues in Quebec City. Can you bring in enough money from corporate sponsors like you can in Houston? Obviously, there's a more passionate market in Quebec, but there is a larger amount of people in Houston, and that is always going to be an appealing factor for the National Hockey League. The strong American dollar, although it wasn't as strong as it used to be, also a little bit of an issue, so there's economics in it. And I believe that I believe that Texas is one of the states that doesn't have a state income tax, right? Texas and Florida. And that's another big deal. The NHL likes to be in markets where, you know, they don't have to pay any state taxes. When you're making millions of dollars a year, it does make a difference. I'm totally aware of Videotron Center. I totally know that they have that going on there. But what was that built in 92? Was that in 92 or 2002? Or 2012? Damn it, I know it ended in a 2. I really know it ended in a 2. I think the National Hockey League wants to go to Quebec City. I really believe that they do. I just think it's last on their list. You know, that's the difference. 2012. All right, so it's a relatively new building. I don't know why I was thinking 1992. It's a relatively new building. Got it for you here on the screen. Let me bring that up for you guys so you can take a look. Not bad. Pretty nice. Broke ground in 2012, opened for biz in 2015. All right, so it's brand spanking new. So obviously they have a viable arena there in Quebec as well. But again, corporate sponsorship I know is a big deal. And the fact that it is a Canadian market. And you have a couple of Canadian struggling markets right now, which is unheard of in the history of the National Hockey League. I mean, it's one thing for Arizona to be struggling. It's another thing for, you know, the capital of Canada to have a team in the playoffs and not being able to sell all the seats. I mean, that's insane. The Senators desperately need an arena in downtown. I mean, desperately. I mean, so much so, and we talked about this, Don Cherry's out there going, well, if Ottawa's not going to make it, then move him to Quebec. I mean, here Don Cherry and I think a lot of other people in Canada are ready to forego an expansion team and having to wait and just move the Ottawa Senators over. But there's a lot of facets to this. And again, corporate sponsorship, sales tax, all that kind of stuff comes into play here. But from what I understand, the Board of Governors are going to be hush discussing this. And it'll be the real sign of how interested the National Hockey League is in expanding to Seattle, depending on how much they talk about it after the fact. If they admit fully that they discussed Seattle as a destination, then I would expect a National Hockey League team to drop the puck in Seattle in 2020. I think we're not that far away. I fully expect that to happen. Because if you think about it, I mean, it is almost a solid 3 years away because, you know, the NHL doesn't start until October. It's December 17. So they do, you know, 17 to 18, 18 to 19, 19 to 20. They really do have a legit 3 years to get the puck on the ice over there in Seattle. But here's the interesting point that I was thinking about today, and it's this, and this is where the Calgary Flames come into the mix. Obviously, the National Hockey League wants to stabilize the troubled franchises they have right now, and they have a couple of great prospects on the horizon, right? You have a new owner in Arizona who I understand is having some difficulty, but at least he's still new. They're negotiating what to do with the Coyotes' debt because the franchise has a lot of debt on it right now. They owe a lot of money. Their operating costs are okay, not great, could be better, but it's just paying off the amount of debt that they have that becomes the real issue in Arizona. The Carolina Hurricanes have some prospective owners that are interested, so that's a good situation. As far as Calgary goes, they're sort of sitting in no man's land. And here's the problem with getting too excited about Seattle for the National Hockey League in an official stance. They can be as excited as they want behind the scenes, and they are. But here's why you can't, and it's important for Quebec and it's important for Houston. You have to make the government of Calgary understand that the Flames ownership has other options. That is so important for the stabilization of the Calgary Flames. You have to make them think the possibility of Calgary moving to Houston / Quebec City / Seattle is possible. You don't have to have any intention on doing it. It doesn't have to be realistic from any sort of standpoint other than you can't rule it out. That's the most important thing for the National Hockey League. So I think they'll be excited. I think you might hear them say, well, if I had to predict what's going to happen tomorrow, if I had to predict what's going to happen yesterday, I'd be in golden. I already know. If I had to predict what was going to happen tomorrow, I would guess that Gary Bettman, or better yet, Bill Daley, or better yet, one of the governors, will come out of that meeting and say, we did not discuss Seattle other than the fact that we're aware that they just had the $600 million renovation approved by the city council. That would be my guess, that they are not going to comment on that any further than we're aware that it happened. You know, the idea of saying, well, we know it happened and we have ownership groups that are in the universe, in the atmosphere. Too quick for that. You know, the idea of saying, we're aware and we're going to start accepting applications from ownership groups. I think too soon for that. I think if Calgary was healthy and Carolina and Arizona and Florida were healthy franchises, I think they'd come out of this meeting and they'd say, great news, everybody. National Hockey League's open for business. If you want to own a team in Seattle, start sending over your bank statements. But because they're not in that position, I think the NHL needs to hold back on their obvious excitement that we all know that they have because of the position that Calgary is in. you have to make the mayor of Calgary and the city council and anybody involved in getting them an arena aware of the fact that if you don't help us, we're going to pick up and move to Seattle. That possibility has to be there. When you look at all the threats of moving a franchise, and I bring up the Islanders because they were the biggest one most recently. A lot of people started talking about Kansas City. Hell, we all know this game. There were leaks coming straight from the Islanders themselves. Where do you think this stuff comes from? I worked for I worked for the Islanders. Okay? You know how many times I've seen the PR person or the general manager go, psst, psst, newspaper guy, this is what's happening. You didn't hear this from me, but this is what's happening. It happens all the time. It happens all the time. With the Islanders, it was Kansas City. And when things were getting really rough, do you know what the Islanders went and did? They went and booked a preseason game in Kansas City. I mean, it was the greatest thing of all time. It was the greatest thing I've ever seen. The Islanders literally turned around and said, oh, yeah? You don't want to help us out? We'll play a preseason game in Kansas City. And they went down there and they played it. They went down there and they played it. But it wasn't even the fact that they had to play it, because I think by the time they played it, it was all said and done. It was just the fact that they announced it. It was the pure announcement. I wouldn't be surprised, and maybe not in Key Arena, although I don't know if they have any other arenas that are suitable. Although the NHL will downsize for preseason games. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw Calgary in a preseason game against Vancouver in Seattle. I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked if it came to that. Hopefully it doesn't. But here's the point. The National Hockey League needs to leave that seat open for the Calgary Flames so that they can play that card. Calgary needs to be able to go to their city council, their mayor, their whoever's going to help them get a new arena, and turn around and say, if you don't help us, we are going to Quebec. If you don't help us. And now here's the important part. To say, and the Islanders weren't in this boat, but for the Islanders to say, if you don't help us, we're going to Kansas City, that was their only option. That was it. It wasn't a bad one. They had an arena ready to go. But that was their only option. If you're the Calgary Flames right now, and you turn around and say, if you don't help us, we're going to put the franchise up to the highest bidder. We're going to go to Quebec, Seattle, and Houston and say, who wants us more? And now you've got a lot of pressure. Because now you've got a bidding war between three cities and markets that are desperate to get a hockey team, that are desperate to bring along all the things that is great about having a hockey team. The revenue, the parking, the tickets, whatever you can get your hands on. You own part of the arena, you own the parking, whatever it is, whatever they can bring it. They are desperate to have that. And that'll force the Calgary Flames and the city to come to an agreement. What up, Liz? I do remember that. Yeah, if you remember, there was one game where a whole bunch of people from Quebec showed up to the Islander game in Nordiques jerseys with signs being like, follow us back up to Quebec and all this stuff. Yeah, Quebec pulled out all the stops. By the way, and I can't really prove this, but from what I understand, they were treated very nicely by the franchise. Maybe a couple of comp tickets fell into their laps. By the way, there's no super. How many times in an average NHL game do you see a disturbance in the stands shown on TV? How many times? 0 times. But it was advantageous for the Islanders telecast to shoot the camera over there at all those people in Quebec jerseys being like, hey, look at this. It became a story because the Islanders allowed it to become a story. Now, it's no secret they would have gotten out on Twitter or whatever, but when the team's broadcast slaps a camera in their face going, look at this. Come on. They pulled out all the stops. The Islanders pulled out all the stops. And it worked good enough. That's what the Calgary Flames need to be doing. The Calgary Flames need to be like, if you don't like it, we'll go to Seattle. And if Seattle don't like it, we'll go to Quebec. Like, they need three. They have three dance partners. They're going to get snatched up right quick. Right? Think about when the pretty girl in high school suddenly becomes single. There's like 50 guys waiting to ask her to, to the next dance. The next dance. What is this, 1950? Do they even ask people to dances, or do you just swipe right on their... I don't even know how it works anymore. It's been a long time since I've been out of the game. So that's pretty interesting. So I think the National Hockey League are, eyes wide open. I think the National Hockey League is dying to get into Seattle. I think 32 franchises, they can handle that very quickly. And again, the idea of getting $600 million in here to the owners so that they can split that up right away is very, very enticing. Very, very enticing. Forbes, while we're on the topic, Forbes released the most valuable teams in the National Hockey League without Googling. Can you take a guess? Who do you think is the most valuable franchise in the National Hockey League? This may surprise you. I'll be honest with you. Smidge surprised. I was a smidge surprised at who the most valuable franchise is in the National Hockey League. I was surprised. I was really surprised. Golden Dawn. Quebec has amazing French women. Is that right? Unfortunately, I wouldn't know. But I'll take your word for it, my man. Eddie, Toronto or Montreal? I thought it would have been Toronto. Not Toronto. Not Toronto. Liz on Facebook has it. The most valuable franchise in the National Hockey League now, and wait until you hear the evaluation, the New York Rangers. According to Forbes, NHL teams' values are up 15% over the last year to an average of $494 million. By the way, a couple of things come into play on that. And one of those things is the fact that Bill Foley paid $500 million for his Vegas Golden Knights. That is a big, big deal. That is a big, big deal. Let's see. Deal making in and out of the National Hockey League has been a boom to the NHL. Most notably, the $2.2 billion sale of the Houston Rockets. The $1.2 billion price for the Miami Marlins. Again, I said this. It was the Clippers sale. Remember that? When the guy said all the racist stuff and then he sold his team. And then the guy in the Microsoft guy bought it. I forget who the guy who bought it is. Some computer nerd. He came in and bought the franchise for all that money. And that is what really shot all the values of teams straight up through the roof. And it's continued. Rockets for $2.2 billion. Miami Marlins for $1.2 billion. By the way, it was good to hear Jeter. I heard Jeter on New York radio the other day. He was talking about being an owner now with the Miami Marlins. And it was really cool. It was really cool to see Jeter in that role. I think he's going to flourish in that role. Just to talk about baseball really quickly here. Jeter was asked if he ever considered coaching, and his answer was basically, do you know how grueling a baseball schedule is? I just went through 20 years of that. Why would I want to continue that? I don't know if you know this or not, but owners go to bed at like 11 o'clock at night in their own beds for the most part. And then they wake up whenever they feel like the next morning and go to work. You know, you're in a baseball team. You're finishing one town. You fly in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then you got to be up for batting practice the next day. It's a brutal schedule. Jeter is going to be hugely, hugely successful with the Miami Marlins. $1.2 billion is what they just went for. The Vegas Golden Knights went for $500 million. Told you that was a big help in getting the average value of the franchises up. It's no surprise they paid $500 and $594 is the average. The NHL has benefited from several off-ice factors, including their deal with Major League Baseball. If you guys don't know, if you look at the NHL's website, they're streaming NHL Network. All that is now housed and run by Major League Baseball. MLB AM or ML BAM is what they call it. Does a lot of the digital arm of the National Hockey League. And that was a big move for the National Hockey League. Not only did it expand their reach, but it also got them a 10% stake in the company, and they're seeing more from streaming service. Overall, it was a good deal. It was a really good deal. ESPN, by the way, bought a third of BAMTech at $3 billion. And so that put that little bit of investment that they have through the roof for them. So they're doing pretty good there. Higher team revenues, general gate, premium seating, television, advertising, and profits, excluding the night's expansion fee, worth over $16 million to each of the 30 pre-existing teams. Also boosted values. Average revenue for the 2016-17 season increased 8% to $148 million. Operating income went up 20% over the previous season to an average of $18 million. And now the New York Rangers, as a result of all of this, is the National Hockey League's most valuable franchise at $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion. I'll have to check, but I'm pretty sure it was the Toronto Maple Leafs that were the most valuable for a really long time. A really long time. Pens was a good guess, by the way. Pens was a good guess, DS, but they're not usurping, if you will, the New York Rangers. Think about it. Number one media market in the country, in the United States. Original six franchise. They were always up on top of the list, always top 3 or 4, but they went all the way up to the top with all these deals that we discussed. And you know, obviously they're in the States, they're making a whole bunch of money. $1.5 billion for the New York Rangers. That's huge. Last season, the Rangers had more revenue, $246 million, and operating income, $94 million, than any other hockey team. The Leafs just behind them at $1.4 billion. The Canadiens at $1.25 billion. Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, which owns the Leafs and the NBA's Raptors, inked a 20-year, $640 million arena naming rights deal with Scotiabank, the richest in sports. $640 million just for the naming rights of the arena. These sports deals are going through the roof. It's unbelievable what these franchises are getting now. And I'll tell you what, and if you're unaware of this, one of the big reasons why this sort of thing has happened is, believe it or not, the explosion of streaming and DVR. The best thing that happened to sports is DVR. And I've said this before, and believe me, I deal with this at the radio station I work for. I deal with this with some of the marketing clients that I have. The world has changed drastically in the last 2 years. By the way, doing a internet hockey show was not a respectable thing 5 years ago. It now is. Having a podcast was something that everybody in real broadcasting laughed at you for. Now some of the podcasters make more money than the broadcasters. Who's laughing now? The world has changed. The way we consume sports and media, it has all changed. And what's happening is everybody, and you're guilty of this too, I'm sure you are. If you're watching something, odds are you're watching it on your time, not TV's time, your time. Oh, DVR that. We'll watch it later. We'll fast forward to the commercials. I'll just watch that when it comes out on HBO Go instead of watching it on HBO at 9 o'clock. Right? You're doing all that stuff. So what happens when you sit down to DVR? You don't watch the commercials. Fast forward, which means the value of TV spots are on the decline. Seriously on the decline. By the way, and I'm in radio, this is why radio has actually been able to survive somewhat, and nobody's really talking about this too much, but radio is a live medium. Can't fast forward through radio. You just can't. So the value of radio spots are actually staying the same, whereas the TV value is going down. And where is that evident where you cannot fast forward, but in live programming? What has the most live programming? Sports. So this is why you're getting these billion-dollar TV contracts, is because that's the only place companies can go where they know you'll sit through their commercial. You'll sit through the timeout sponsored by blah, blah, blah. You'll sit through the power play brought to you by blah, 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 right? That's where all the value is in marketing and advertising right now. So that's why these franchises are worth so much, because the TV and sponsorship money is worth so much. And that's because that's the only place you can go to get your message across. It's the only place. So that's a big reason why these franchises are going through the roof. The TV money, the live money, it's just, it's too big of an industry. It's far too big of an industry. Let me see here. Trying to think who else rounds out the group here. Vegas is not really the floor. For example, the Arizona Coyotes couldn't sell for anything close to $500 million. Just 2 years ago, a controlling stake in the money-losing team went for $305 million, and a few months ago, the sale of a large minority piece valued the team at $240 million. So Arizona is valued at $240 million. The Carolina Hurricanes are not worth $500 million. Beware the difference between the headline sale price and the real sale price. For example, when the Florida Panthers were sold to Vincent Viola in 2013, the headline price was $250 million. Real price, between $140 and $160 million. The difference was the number crunchers promoting the $250 million price were included the capitalized value of the team's lease at BB&T Center. Highly questionable. But for small market teams that are well run, Blues, Lightning, Predators, the Vegas fee provides legitimate juice. The Blues are also on the verge of a new, more lucrative TV deal. Do we have anything else to get into here? And this all looks like gobbledygook to me. It is. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, why would anybody want to buy the Carolina Hurricanes? How are they going to make money off of them? That's a steal. If you're a savvy investor, you buy low and you sell high. If you can scoop up the Carolina Hurricanes for $240 million, you do it. You do it, because when the TV deal comes up, or the next big national TV deal comes up, or Seattle gets a team, suddenly you're pulling in a cool, you got to think about that. If Seattle gets a team, Vegas, everybody got $16 million. If Seattle gets a team and it's at $600 million, everybody's going to grab a couple of million more. That's easy money. That's easy money. If you could figure out how to make the team work and operate, get into a couple of good playoff series, make your money back, couple of expansions. Think about that. If the league expands to 3 markets in the next 15 years, that's $1.5 billion spread around 31 teams, 32 teams. That's amazing. That is amazing. It was only like 15 years ago the Penguins couldn't fill the seats even when they were deep in the playoffs. Obviously now that's not the case, but still don't think they're super valuable. I think the Pens are obviously better than they were. I don't know what their ranking would be in this. Forbes hasn't released the full list just yet. But they're definitely more valuable than they were years ago. I mean, think about it. Even teams that weren't on the verge of falling out, all the values have gone up. All the values have gone up. Like I said, during the Islanders sale, when the Clippers thing happened, the price of the Islanders went up immediately. It just happens that way. The Canadian TV deal, the American TV deal, prices go up. It's just the way it goes. It's just the way it goes. And by the way, it's no accident that the National Hockey League is playing games in Sweden. The National Football League is playing games in London. Why do you think that is? It's TV money. That's a whole other market. You have to do nothing but say, oh, okay, you can show my games. And you get all that money and revenue in. you know? And I'm actually getting Hurricanes season tickets. Honestly, it may be cheaper for you to get season tickets and an airplane seat down to Carolina from New York than grabbing a seat at Madison Square Garden. Not at a $1.5 billion evaluation. That's going to be rough. You don't think the ticket prices are going up for you Ranger fans next year? You better believe it. You better believe it. Quickly here before we go, Sportsnet has released a really, really interesting list of trade bait on each franchise. In other words, if they had to pick one player to be traded or at least be dangled in front of other general managers, who would it be on each franchise? The nice folks over at Sportsnet decided to put that list together, and the nice folks over here at the Hockey Talk Show decided to critique the hell out of that list. Here it is. Tampa Bay. I find this interesting, though. In some cases, they say, look, like you see here with Tampa Bay, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if you had to do something, impending UFA, Andre Schuster would be the one to go. I don't think Andre Schuster is going anywhere. He's got a $1.95 million cap hit. Super affordable. Tampa doesn't need anything. I believe they'll hold on to him. The Preds could use some depth at center. Preds have an abundance of defensemen. No reason to spend a lot of time on this. They will obviously, get the help if they need, and whoever the other team wants in return is who the other team is going to get. The Kings, let me see here, have already traded their Michael Camilleri and waived Brooks Laich. Los Angeles isn't trading Doughty anytime soon. The Kings do have some extra picks, so they say the 4th and the 6th round picks. The Jets are interesting. Impending RFA, Jacob Trouba, who has arbitration rights, could win his arbitration and price himself out of the Winnipeg market. That would be an interesting one to see if Jacob Trouba forces their hand on that. Over with the St. Louis Blues, Doug Armstrong always makes savvy moves. Shat Deuces, he moved when he had to. And he could make that move again with Paul Stastny, who is an impending UFA and overpaid at $7.5 million a season. That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Let's see here. Daniel, didn't Mr. Wong pay like $120K for the Islanders? Charles Wong, I forget what the initial price was, but for a guy who lost $20 million a year, and that was the big story and headline for the Islanders, he certainly did make all that money back when he sold the franchise. By the way, still a part-time owner. Still owns part of the team. He has a minority stake in the team, so he still has some skin in the game, but not controlling rights whatsoever. But yeah, and again, it's common knowledge. He said the Islanders were for sale for X amount. He pulled it back, and from what I understand, added another $75 to $100 million on top of the asking price. That's what he did, and he got it. The Barclays deal was a great move, by the way, because the Barclays Center has to pay the Islanders $50 million a year, plus what the team gets in TV deals and everything else. There's a lot of money with the New York Islanders. Believe me, that's a team that actually does fairly okay financially. They have one of the great cable TV deals. They get $25 million from cable TV just to show their games. So from the Barclays and the cable TV deal, there's your salary right there. There's where you're paying all your players. Everything else they can make off of all the other stuff, the merchandising, the gate, all that. And I believe they get a percentage of the gate. I don't think the Barclays keeps all of that. I think they have to get some of that. So the Islanders are doing just fine. And by the way, the Islanders don't employ a staff whatsoever outside of hockey operations because the Barclays Center has to sell their tickets. Drop that bass. Hurricanes are making the playoffs, okay? Maybe. I'm not ready to rule them out just yet. Not whatsoever. The Vegas Golden Knights, they pegged James Neal as the tradable asset. Not happening. Vegas is making the playoffs. They're taking all their UFAs into the postseason with them. Boone Jenner for the Columbus Blue Jackets. 3 goals this year, 30 goals last year. I could definitely see him being a change of scenery move if they need to. Now, I think they have it wrong here with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Their 3 top 9 forwards on expiring deals are Tyler Bozak, James Van Riemsdyk, and Leo Komarov. I don't know if they can bring back Van Riemsdyk and sign Austin Matthews when they need to the year after next. So he might walk in the offseason, but as you're heading into the playoffs, you can't send a talented winger like James Van Riemsdyk off to another team for, a couple of draft picks. You need that to go far into the postseason. So I don't think Bozak or James Van Riemsdyk go. Komarov, I love his play, and I think Babcock does too, even though he likes to throw him up and down the lines. We all know that Toronto does need defense, and I think if they did make a move, KK right there, Kasperi, Kapanen would be the one to go. Josh Levo, certainly possible. People are talking about maybe Nylander going, and again, that would be a move where you send away one of your amazing young prospects to bring back an amazing young defensive prospect. You're not going to downgrade the prospect level or the potential of a Nylander, but you're going to just switch out that forward prospect and upstart, outstanding young player for a defensive upstart prospect, outstanding young player. The New York Islanders, John Tavares would be the ultimate trade chip. They point out, problem is the Islanders are good this year thanks to Matthew Barzal. They are doing outstanding. I do agree with them on this one. Snow does have a first and second round draft pick. Look for him to be a buyer towards the end of the season. If the Islanders have any injuries, if the Islanders have little faith in their goaltending tandem, if somebody were to go cold, I would see the Islanders moving both that first and second round draft pick to make something happen there. The Devils need to add, not subtract, but they do point out that Captain Andy Green is 35. I don't see him going anywhere. The Rangers. This is the most interesting one for me. The Rangers is the most interesting one for me. Now, I said at the beginning of the season, if the Rangers are struggling, they should trade Lundqvist and Nash and get everybody off their payroll and really open themselves up for some of the free agents that are coming, specifically the defensive free agents that are available in 2019. If you're not aware of that, go back a couple of shows to the Doughty and Carlson are leaving, that episode of the Hockey Talk Show. Watch that one and look at all the amazing players that are available come 2019 on the defensive end of the puck. It is ridiculous. Just ridiculous. But this is an interesting one to me because obviously the Rangers are not tanking. They've gotten off to a rough start, but they're playing a whole hell of a lot better. Lundqvist is back in his form. He's leading the team even though he didn't play last night. He's still doing one hell of a job for the New York Rangers. He's keeping them in it. I'll never bet against Alain Vigneault, not once in my life. He is an amazing coach. So I have a lot of faith in the New York Rangers. But where this gets super interesting for me is Rick Nash only has 13 points, 27 games into the season, 7 goals, 6 assists. Certainly not playing at a high level. I don't even think he's on the first line, is he? We'll have to go to our dailyfaceoff.com to find out, baby. Love dailyfaceoff.com. I keep plugging those guys because I want to show them love because they do such a phenomenal job. Let's see what the Rangers lines are at. David Desharnais is your number one center. That actually makes the bottom of my spine hurt. Pavel Buchnevich is on the first line. Chris Kreider, whatever works for you. Nash is playing second line with VC and Hayes. How is Zuccarello on the third line? He's got 22 points. Why is he on the third line? Is that a little bit of a speeder line there with Grabner? Has Grabner ever played with Zuccarello and Kreider? That would be one of the fastest lines ever. That'd be a line I'd like to see. This seems backwards to me. Seems like Rick Nash. Is Nash on that line to try and get him going? I'm confused. What's interesting to me about this is I could totally see the Rangers getting rid of Rick Nash and still making a run for the playoffs. I don't really see him being a big part of that. I don't see anybody saying, well, you can't trade Rick Nash because we're going to the playoffs. I think you can. The problem becomes is, can you find a trade partner to take him? That I don't know. He's a rental player on a playoff team if somebody could fit him into the mix, but he ain't a great rental player at that. I mean, there's a lot of other, he's going to be far down on that list because his production is garbage for this season. But, you know, I do look at it sort of like what Tampa did with Brian Boyle. They traded him at the deadline because things didn't look good, and then all of a sudden they just rebounded and took off and you know, made a great run without an asset. Even though they were sellers at the deadline, they still made a great run. I could see the Rangers trading Rick Nash and still making a good run towards the playoffs, if not in the playoffs. I could absolutely see that happening. So that's one of the more interesting ones for me. I think that they should get out from under that contract as soon as they possibly can. I would take whatever. I would take whatever. But, I mean, they're not going to trade him to the East, especially if they're in a playoff run. They're not going to play against him in the playoffs. And again, not like it's a huge run. And I don't think there's going to be really all that big of a market for him to begin with. But, like, I could see, like, an Anaheim, or, I mean, I could see, you know, if somebody has got a big injury and they want to fill that hole. I've seen crazier things. Everybody else is out. Let's be honest. He'll be the cheapest ad at the deadline if that's possible. I mean, I'm sure you could snag him for a 4th or 5th round pick. Honestly, why not? Maybe that pick gets a little higher if you trade and sign him. But who's going to sign him? I wouldn't. Hell, if I was Rick Nash, I wouldn't take it. I mean, I think he can wait it out and pick up his value a little bit in the open market in this summertime. But I'd walk away from Rick Nash, though, if I were the Rangers. Absolutely, I would. Rick Nash will be in a Coyotes jersey real soon, believe me. Elliot Friedman reported hearing Jason Spezza's name in trade rumors last month, and it wouldn't surprise him if he found out that Dallas would be willing to move on the fading star who makes $7.5 million this year and next. Dallas would definitely have to take on another bad contract or retain some salary. Interesting for the Caps. They're fighting for a playoff spot. Likely to keep John Carlson and Lars Eller as long as they're in the mix. But from what I heard, Lars Eller was on the block and was on the way to go. Canucks have maybe the best trade asset of all in Thomas Vanek. Vanek has been traded more than, I mean, you could just name any kind of weird joke that you want to name right here. It's just Vanek has seen more teams than the referees do. It's unbelievable. But Vancouver's in a playoff spot. I don't know if they're going to want to let him go, but if they were to fade out of that, Vanek would be high on the trade list. People are going to want to bring in a Thomas Vanek. He brings some value to the team. I like this. Chicago talking about maybe Brent Seabrook would be the thing to move. That would be great if you're the Toronto Maple Leafs, Edmonton Oilers, or any of these teams that need a great puck-moving defenseman. Brent Seabrook would be the guy to go to. Who cares about Jannik Hansen? Pittsburgh, we all know that Ian Cole is on the trade block. No surprise there. The Bruins are an interesting case. They're one of these middle-of-the-pack teams. They're 4 points behind the Rangers, who are 1 point behind Pittsburgh for the final wild card spot. Ryan Spooner has just 1 goal in 10 games. That is not that great for him. 25 years old. He's up for a new deal as an RFA. I could see him going. Maybe the big prize in all of this is at number 19 with Max Pacioretty and the Montreal Canadiens. From what I understand, Max Pacioretty is just fed up and exhausted with this team failing every single year. Now, the Canadiens have risen back to prominence. They have 29 points in the weaker Atlantic Division. You know, the Canadiens have 29 points and they're in the final playoff spot in the Atlantic. Washington and Pittsburgh have 33 points and are taking up the final wild card positions. And the Rangers have 32 points and they're out of a playoff spot. So here's one of the cases that I'm making the other day on the show, is that the Metropolitan is the strongest division in hockey. And you see it right there, because the Rangers have a better record than the Montreal Canadiens. But if the season were to end today, Montreal would be in the playoffs and the Rangers would be playing golf. So Montreal might be able to squeak in on the technicality of Boston stinks, and so does Detroit, and so does Ottawa. So we'll have to see what happens there. But if the Canadiens were to fall, essentially, whenever Carey Price decides to have his big long-term injury spill, Pacioretty could be on the move. And I think teams would be just offering their first child to get him. Matthew Dumba for the Minnesota Wild. I think he's been on the block for quite some time. Good, young, puck-moving defenseman. He would bring on a big return. Brad Treliving has been a buyer all year long, especially in the offseason. They list TJ Brody, who hasn't quite caught the expectation of the coaching staff. Travis Hamonic was just acquired. I don't think that they'll move on Hamonic. Hamonic will get his footing. This is first-year player on a new team. Woes. The Hurricanes are trying to make the playoffs. Drop That Base says they're going to be there. 27 points right now, just 2 behind Montreal. They could catch up in the Atlantic. It's definitely possible. I could see them adding instead of getting rid of anybody. Dangling Noah Hannafin, I don't see that possible. I think that's insane talk. Hannafin is going to be a cornerstone for their defense moving forward. Why anybody would want to trade him is beyond me. Patrick Maroon available for the Edmonton Oilers. That's a better move than Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. You want to keep the RNH in the lineup if you can. He's the better player. I don't know if there's going to be much of a market for Maroon because he is benefiting from playing with Connor McDavid. Blake Como being available for the Colorado Avalanche is laughable. I have more value on the trade market than Blake Como does. The Anaheim Ducks have 4 draft picks in the first 3 rounds. So if they're going to buy, expect them to move picks for players. Again, I could see them vying for Nash. If a Getzlaf, if a Perry, if a Kessler is not going to be there for them, Nash fits that mold, even though he plays and you have to make room for his Walker on the bench. Radim Verbata, I believe, will be definitely moved from the Panthers at the end of the season. Florida just 6 points above Buffalo for the last playoff spot. I don't think they make it. I think Radim Verbata will be traded. I believe Mike Green will absolutely be traded. He's the gem of the defensive core as far as rental goes for the end of the season here. Trade deadline, Mike Green gets moved for sure. The Coyotes and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, I think he's the gem as far as you're not grading him to be a rental. He's got another year left on his deal. I think Oliver Ekman-Larsson goes before the deadline, but I wouldn't be surprised if he goes at the deadline. Philadelphia Flyers are interesting at 29. Wayne Simmons is the dream pickup for every playoff-bound franchise. I mean, he's like Rick Nash with like Rick Nash skill from like 7 years ago. Cap hit's manageable at $4 million. The problem with Simmons, he does have a no-trade. He has a 12-team no-trade list. And there's no guarantee that Ron Hextall wants to mess with the other 19 teams on the NHL platform. So we'll see what is available for Philadelphia. Senators maybe sending out Cody Ceci. What about the Senators trading Matt Duchene? I wonder if the Senators would trade Duchene again. I think they picked up Duchene with an extra year, with the idea that they were going to be amazing, and they're not. Sens management is in love with Matt Duchene. They targeted Matt Duchene from the get. Before Matt Duchene was even available, before he was upset, the Sens were contacting Colorado like, hey, if you want to get rid of Matt Duchene, we'll totally be willing to go. What are they going to do there? They have to figure out something, because in 2 years, this team is a mess. Stone, Carlson, and Duchene are all available for free agency. What do you do there? I mean, think about it. I don't want to trade Duchene. On paper, that doesn't make any sense. But can you keep Duchene, Carlson, and Stone? Hell no. You might not even be able to keep 2 out of the 3 of them. And again, Duchene is worth a lot more now with an extra year on his deal than he's going to be worth next season. Evander Kane will be moved for certain. The Sabres are terrible. I'm sorry, Sabre fans. I know we got a lot of Sabre fans in here. But the Sabres are terrible. Evander Kane's having a fairly decent year. He got 25 points in 28 games? Evander Kane will definitely be moved. I'll tell you where I'd like to see Evander Kane go, and you're going to think I'm nuts. Vegas. I think that Vegas should add Evander Kane. I think Evander Kane has a house in Vegas. He loves visiting Vegas. He's having a good year. You don't have to commit to him next season. If the Vegas Golden Knights are a first-round exit, then they can do whatever they need to do after that, you know. But if they go on a long run, they don't have to worry about holding on to players that have a lot of term left and are getting paid a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, grabbing a guy like Kane still leaves the Vegas Golden Knights the option to rebuild and retool in the summertime. Still gives them that option, you know. If they don't want to throw a ton of money around and they want to let all their free agents walk, or a bunch of their free agents walk, it's not a bad idea to have Evander Kane on your roster going into the playoffs. Out of that list, who do you think is the most prized possession there? I think Evander Kane will be a solid rental. A super solid rental. I like that. Realistic trade bait addition. I think Evander Kane is a really, really solid rental. I think Wayne Simmons might be the best one as far as forwards go. He might be the easiest to move. Montreal might be in it, so Pacioretty might not be so easily available. I like Simmons because he can drop the gloves. Dynamite drop in there, Liz. Totally true. He drops the gloves and drops them well. He'd be valuable for anybody. Eddie, Kane would be good in Toronto. I think Kane would be. I think Toronto needs to focus on Mike Green. That's the move for me for Toronto. Get that Mike Green in there. You're heading into the playoffs. You got Gardner. You got a lot of great, you got O'Reilly back there. Not O'Reilly, Morgan Riley back there. Riley, Gardner, Green. That's a nice 3 out of 4 for your first 2 power play units. I like Mike Green for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Big time. Big time. That's where I want to see the Toronto Maple Leafs focusing. Pull in that Mike Green. Get him to come in. Unless you're going to go all in and you're going to really give up some important pieces for an Oliver Ekman-Larsson. That's the only other way I see going for the Toronto Maple Leafs. All right, let me know in the comments below whenever you're watching, who do you think is the most realistic trade bait on that trade bait list? Who would you like to see your team get? Who's most likely to get moved? And we'll catch up with the comments as we go through the overnight tonight and tomorrow. Should be an interesting show tomorrow. We'll hear a whole heck of a lot more on the Board of Governors meeting, what they're going to be discussing. Again, look out for these points. How much do the National Hockey League officials comment on Seattle? It's important to note who comments. Gary Bettman talking about it is a bigger deal than Bill Daly, who's a bigger deal than one of the owners, who's a bigger deal than one of the general managers. Whoever they send out there to comment on Seattle is going to be the point. And I think that what they're going to say is, we're aware, we heard of the $600 million renovation, and they're going to go from there. I don't think that they commit to ticket drives. I don't think that they talk about opening up for proposals. I don't think they even comment on some of the ownership groups that are available, which, by the way, I understand filmmaker Jerry Bruckheimer has got a billionaire friend, and the two of them are going to be in on bringing the team over to Seattle. I think that's the ownership group for the Seattle franchise. So we'll wait and see what happens there. But if they comment on any of those other things, they're leaving Calgary with less opportunity. And they're also tipping their hand that, hey, we're going to Seattle, and we're going to be there soon. Puck drops in Seattle in 2020. I think that's what they're saying. And personally, I like to see Nash traded, overrated, and not clutch. That's the thing. Nash used to, it's an awesome point. Nash used to have great regular seasons and then blow it in the playoffs, right? Now he's not having a good regular season, and he's most likely going to cough it up in the playoffs. Stastny would be a good pickup for the New York Rangers if they had to go out and get somebody. I like him at 7.5. It's a lot, but if they could fit it in under the cap, he's a good center. He'll definitely help the New York Rangers out if they have to. I wouldn't go after Spezza because he's got another year left on his deal where Stastny doesn't, so that helps you there. The easiest thing, although not a center, but who cares, because the Rangers have plenty of guys that can play the middle and take face-offs. Again, David Desharnais is your first line. Like, you're not bringing in three centers, you know what I'm saying? So you might as well just go for the better forward. I like Stastny, but to my point, Thomas Vanek is going to be a good value for anybody. He's lazy, which lazy players tend not to do well in New York. But I think he'll be a valuable asset if they had to go out and grab somebody. Ryan Spooner is interesting. Good centerman. Change of scenery, not working out in Boston. I could see something there. Blake Como. No, that was uncalled for. That's not even a near funny joke. Yeah, I would say Stastny is the way to go. Stastny would be the get for me. He's the best out of all of them because he's got no term. You know, you can come in and overpay him this season, and then who really cares, you know? But can you pull him away from St. Louis? I think so, because Doug Armstrong likes to send guys off. He doesn't. It doesn't really matter to him. You know, it really doesn't matter. Playoff bound or not, he has no problem moving a player if he knows he's not going to retain his rights. He likes to kind of get back whatever he can for him. That's been Doug's move. But Doug doesn't have a contract, as we were talking about on the show last night, so we'll have to wait and see there. Fun talking about this stuff. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about the trades that are coming up and these impending free agents. Again, Board of Governors meeting is going to be pretty big tomorrow. Friday, we'll have full reaction from those meetings, although we might be able to get into it. They might be done by 6, so maybe tomorrow we'll do reaction from the Board of Governors meeting. I do want to talk about attendance because we have some figures that are coming in, which are really interesting. Carolina fans are going to want to pay attention. Vegas fans are going to want to pay attention. So we do have a lot of stuff to cover on the show tomorrow, so it should be pretty exciting. Thanks for all the comments and everything. You guys are awesome as always. Share the posts on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram if you can, and on YouTube. Remember to subscribe. Throw those YouTube videos around a little bit more if you can. Share the YouTubes on Facebook. That's totally cool too. You could do it that way. Getting more subscribers on YouTube is going to be a focus of ours moving forward. I like you guys being friendly to each other in the chat too. I love that. This is good hockey talk with good hockey people. A pleasure as always. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Look for a 6 o'clock kind of a show in and around that time. And until then, enjoy the hockey forward.